get started. Hello, and welcome to Greet the Week. I'm Mona Duncan, and today's topic is anger resolution.
Oh, yes.
And anger is a big topic, and looking at how we can resolve it, or looking at some choices that we have that could help us to resolve any anger that we are involved in, or things that anger and frustrate us. I read a little article back in 2007 in the Upper Room devotional that I thought was just really powerful, and I wanted to start off with sharing that. The lady that wrote in, she said, if I could have opened the door, I would have slammed it again, because she was so frustrated with things that had been going on. Hours earlier, my 1-year-old son, Chris, had thrown a string of tantrums, driving me to the edge of distraction. I'd slammed the door, and now I had to pay someone to let me back in. And she began to talk to herself and think, how in the world can I help my child, my neighbors, the people that I'm around and influence? How can I help them to, if I can't even control my own anger? And so she called the locksmith, and the locksmith came and showed how that slamming the door had caused a little one of the little mechanisms to short circuit it. And she paid him the money and felt like she was okay with that, because in slamming the door and in paying it, she counted it a cheap lesson to learn, because she realized that that day anger had locked her out. And so my question is, how does anger lock you out? Does it lock you out of peace? What about health? What about relationships? Does anger lock you out of promotion? Does it lock you out of a good self-esteem? Does anger lock you out of having good times? Does it lock you out of having the reputation that you would like to have? Does it lock you out of effective control? Does it lock you out of good health? Well, I have a PowerPoint here, so I'm going to bring it up and share the screen. I think that's it. I'll share it. No, that's not it. Sorry about that. Stop sharing. So looking at how we can resolve anger issues, and not that I don't have the answers to anything. I have some experiences that I have experienced, and so therefore I can share some things that has brought some resolution to me, and also share some things that to anger resolution. How does it block you out? How does it lock you out? So here are some thoughts on resolving it. Resolving is kind of settling something. It's to realize that he who angers you controls you. And I don't like to be controlled. And I'm sure you don't either. And so if we can put that anger aside, kind of accept it. And I know there could be some pushback about that, but acceptance doesn't mean approval. To accept something doesn't mean that you condone it. Sometimes we have to, but it's realizing that if anyone is angering you, any situation is angering you, then we are allowing them to control us. And that what irritates you in others is all too often a reflection of you in them, and we're seeing us in them and we don't like it. I think of a situation with my husband. He belongs to a financial group, and there is one person in particular that goes way overboard on explaining and conducting, and anyway, it's a source of irritation. And so one time we were driving down to San Antonio to visit his brother, and in the road, in the lanes between the two north and south highways, there was a dead deer, and a major amount of vultures were there eating on the deer. And we went into San Antonio and visited his brother, and several hours later we were headed back to Waco, and we passed that same situation, and it was still there. I mean, those vultures were still there. And my husband made this offhanded remark. He says, that meeting must be held by Carl. And he was reflecting back on the times that, you know, sometimes he could become quite irritated, but we don't like to think of that what it is that irritates me so much in another is really me seeing myself in them, and I don't like it. And I don't like it. And as we can begin to see that, where is that in me, so that I can resolve that thing that might equally be irritating to others. And then another thought that I have here on resolving comes from a scripture verse of, be angry and sin not. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath or on your anger. To get over it. There are times that anger does produce things in us, but we don't want to eat it. We don't want to ingest it. And so I have a little thing here to look at. And it's looking at, you know, be angry and sin not. Well, there's a lot of words and a lot of definitions, but one definition of sin is to miss the mark. And so I like to think of it as a target. That, you know what, I'm aiming for the bullseye. That's what I'm shooting for in speaking, in helping, and I'm aiming for that bullseye. But look, I'm all over the board. Sometimes we don't even hit the target. Sometimes we don't even hit, we're way, way, way off base in where we're looking at it. And so to resolve anger, as we consciously, deliberately, on purpose, release those negative thoughts. We talked about that a little bit last week about, you know, one of the things I like to do is tell myself, cancel, 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 whatever that, and really think about it, because there's some kind of a lesson in everything. And then also anger pushes away goodwill. It pushes away love. As we begin to blame the person, I drew this little character here. As we begin to blame the person, as we see the other person as being pitiful. I was talking with a lady one day, and she says, well, you just need to have a little pity for them. And I said, yeah, they're pitiful. And sometimes when we begin to see them as being pitiful, well, anyway, it's the seeing a person as being unattractive. We're seeing them askew. We're seeing them, and it sets us up as being the judge. And some thoughts of how to resolve our anger. Well, another one, 3 thoughts here from Dr. William Glasser on how to resolve anger, how to resolve anything in life, knowing that the only person whose behavior we can control is our own. And then realizing that we almost always have choices. And the better the choice, the more we will be in control of our life. And looking at that situation, that anger that controls us, the more we can be in control, more accepting of, more not non-condoning of, but realizing if it is, it is. And then the more we will be in control of our lives. And then also realizing that if everyone could learn that what is right for me does not make it right for everyone else, the world would be a much happier place. And it kind of goes down to those things that is angering us. If we could look at what we do have control over and don't have control over, and having compassion as opposed to pitifulness for someone else that is acting out. And then in A Course in Miracles, one of the axioms, one of the foundational principles that they have is the fact that I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience. I decide upon the goals I would achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for it and I receive it as I have asked for it. And here's a little graphic that I developed that helps us to see that whenever we see a flower, here's our eyes, we're looking with our eyes, but we really don't see anything. It has to go through so many things to be twisted around so that we project inward to our brain what we think we're seeing. And as we could, so here is some information from Dr. Raymond Brock and his phases of emotional problems, and anger is certainly a part of an emotional problem. And looking at phase 1, that we become angry or have emotional problems when we are hurt. And that hurt is like just a bruised ego. It's a slight, it's a disappointment. It is, there was just something there that didn't set right. It was a hurt. It was a little slap on the wrist. Something happened. And that hurt, we weren't acknowledged. And that hurt leads to a frustration. And frustration is that feeling that we begin to feel when life says no. When life says no, and we wanted it to say yes, or we wanted it to say no, and it did say yes. It's that frustration. And then frustration takes us into fear. And fear, and psychologists tell us that there are really only 2 genuine emotions. On one spectrum, it's fear, and on the other spectrum, it's love. And that every emotion and every experience is an outcropping of one of those 2 major spectrums. And that fear is when we feel like we've lost control, or we are anticipating a reprisal. We're anticipating being fired. We're anticipating I made a mistake and now somebody's going to really, dump it on me. And that leads into anger. And anger is that hurt that is complicated, that's mixed together, that's complicated by that frustration and that fear. And then sometimes that fear, as we hold on to it and let it, as we eat it, as we ingest it, we hold on to it and we let it set up within us, and it becomes a wrath. And that wrath can lead to hostility, that it may have been an outcropping of what happened with one person, but then we begin to spread it around to everybody, that it becomes all men, all women, all police, all political people, all this, that we begin to, spread it out onto everyone. And it becomes bitterness and unforgiveness, and it becomes a collected aggregation, and it leads to hate that often leads to criminal behaviors such as murder and suicide, or lying and wrongdoing, thieving, all kinds of things that those emotional problems can lead to. And anger is certainly a major part of an emotional problem. And so how do we resolve those? We've already looked at some of the statements that what I'm seeing, am I really seeing it, or am I seeing my own perception of it? And so it's to know our own hot spots. It's to get honest with ourselves. And it's to think about it, you know? Am I frustrated, the hot spot because I have a need that wasn't met, that someone is questioning my worth or my integrity or my knowledge? Is it they're disagreeing with the way I see something? Is what I believe being threatened and I have to defend it, and that's producing anger within me? Um, is it because somebody cut me off in line, or they spoke, whenever we're cut off, whatever the cutoff is, whether it was someone that pulled in front of you or stopped too soon? Is it grudges that we've held on? Do we have these hot spots? Do they come up because our esteem, that sometimes we have that overinflated ego trying to compensate for low esteem, and we're just out of balance? That maybe it's a spirit of entitlement, that I should have known that, or having been left out, misunderstandings, and just a few other things. What are some of the hot spots? Think that we know it all, or we're interacting with someone that we think is a know-it-all, that we've been lied about. What about our team losing? What about, whether it was a team or whether it was a game that we was engaged in, whether it was kind of a belittling statement, or maybe we had a belittling thought and it produced anger. The thing of it is to look at all those things, and whenever someone belittles you, it's because they are being little. And can we have compassion for them? That's not an effective way to live life. Humiliated, disrespected. What about waiting? How impatient? How does waiting for something from a small time to a long time produce anger? Being bossed, being told what to do, being judged. So it's looking at Mr. Rogers way back, looking at, I don't know if it was the Mr. Rogers movie or if it was just a documentary that they had about him, that he was telling about a child that had talked with him, and the child said, I don't know what to do with my MAD. And Mr. Rogers goes over to the piano and he begins playing this little melodious tune, and he takes the little boy with him and he begins to make up a song. And this is his song. What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong and nothing you do seems very right. It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong, to be able to do something else instead, and think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop anytime. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. Isn't that beautiful? To know that there's something inside, that we have a choice, that we have the ability to make choices, that we have the ability to see things and to re-see them through another perspective, through one that could help resolve a situation that maybe not until I can calm myself down so that I can speak in a way that is not more antagonizing. To know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. So, talking a little bit about anger. Anger is an emotion that is common to all, and it is a legitimate feeling. It's very legitimate, but it is secondary over fear, and maybe because of that, who wants to be afraid? Nobody wants to be afraid. I'm not afraid. But anger has become so acceptable, at least in our neighborhood, the U.S., it just seems to be so acceptable to be angry. But is it acceptable? Anger is demanding. And in our anger, what are we demanding from the other person? What are we demanding? Are we demanding our way? Are we demanding, as we think of it as a demand? And anger is a forward moving emotion. It seeks to act out. It is wanting to move forward. Anger also is a frequently felt and a frequently denied emotion. But as we can be aware of, as a little bit I'm going to be showing you, looking at some things to how to counteract our anger, how to resolve it. And one is to keep an anger calendar. And if you can see this, I just took this and marked on it today. To every time you have an angry thought or you become angry about something, whether it's what's on TV, what you read in the paper, whatever, if it just sparks that little stir of anger, to mark it down. Keep a record of it. Keep an angry calendar and mark it down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then mark it off 5 so you can go back and count for the week how many times you were angered. But it's a frequently felt and it's frequently denied. But as we get honest with the fact that this is an anger producing situation and we can accept it without condoning it, then we're in a position to be able to speak to it or speak against it or speak in a way that is not throwing more fuel onto the anger producing situation. Depression is often anger that's turned inward in not knowing how to speak it out, not knowing how to bring any resolve. Anger is powerless to affect positive change in a relationship. There's a little graphic I drew that for that anger just pushes it away. And anger is too often directed toward the most important people in our lives. Those people who are essential in meeting our basic needs, whether that is love and belonging, whether that is fun, whether that is the power need, that the people that we become angered with the most maybe are the ones that are most important to us in our overall life. And so realizing that it is with the mind that we think about the issues of life. It is with our emotions that we feel them, and these are pretty automatic, that we feel the issues of life. But it is with the will that we decide the issues of life. Yes, I will act on this anger producing in a way that to get back at, or I will act on it in a way that brings a settling, a resolving of. Because I will do this, I will not do this. It is with the will, and we have all been given the will. That's part of the power need. It is also the will to make the part of decisions, part of the freedom need. It is the will to make decisions. I will do this, I will not do this. So how do we cool down? One is to take 10. Give a little space, begin to breathe, give some space to you. Sometimes, I can't discuss this right now. I need to calm down. We may want to give the other person a little space to calm down, but be careful how you word that. As to, I need to give you some room to calm down. Work it out, and literally work it out. It is by design. Now, anger is one of the things we are born with. Why? It's because we need to make noise. We need to make noise. We need to let someone know. And so that baby that is cold or that is hungry was born with the ability to cry out and to be angry about it, to make noise so that someone would help to meet the need, to see what the need is. But in that anger, we need to work it out. Anger was not to be a part of the blood system. It was to be worked out in the muscles. Work it out, work it out, work it out. And as we get it into the muscles, now get a hammer out and drive some nails. rearrange the furniture, do some lifting, walk around the block, do something to work it out physically, to get that anger out of your blood system and into the muscle area so that it can be worked out. To think. How may I be seeing it in a way that, how am I overreacting? How am I contributing to this angry producing situation? It is keeping an angry calendar, marking it down, marking it down, marking it down, marking it down. Every time that you've had this from the, and you could mark it in a small mark or a heavier mark, depending on how angry you became with each of those things. And as you can look back on it and get honest with yourself, this goes back, we have to be real honest or we won't learn and we won't overcome.
That was crazy.
Check if you're just not that good. And I think back to a article that I read, a blog from Brian Dodge, I believe it was, and how he had been invited to come as a motivational speaker to work with this great big company. And also the person that invited him to come, they went golfing together. And the director of this big business was terrible at golfing, and he was also became quite angry with himself and with others and all this. And Brian Dodge told him, he said, you know what? He said, you're just not good enough at golf to get that mad. And sometimes, and of course, then the way he wrote about it, I think he asked him right up front, first of all, could I give you, may I make a comment about your getting so angry at your golf shots? And the man said no. And then later he was, as they walked on some more, he said, yeah, okay, so what is it you want to say? And he said, you're just not that good to get that mad. And so sometimes we need to stop and realize, you know what, am I getting mad about something because I'm frustrated with myself and I haven't, we've been given gifts and skills and we've been given talents, but just because we've been given a talent doesn't mean it's been developed to the skill it could be. And part of that is the control of anger or the use of anger. Is it something that's going to get us up off of our chair to do something about it? Or is it going to be something that helps us to participate in a riot? Is to be aware of our hot topics and learn how to avoid those hot topics, how to diffuse those hot topics, or how to accept them. If it's something that, you know. Another is to avoid name calling or labeling. It is harder to work with a coworker if you've labeled him a jerk. And so if you would begin to look at them in a different way, this is someone to avoid name calling. And even as we're thinking about that person that is irritating to us and they're going to be coming over or we're going to be engaging with them again, if we can think about them in a lesser destructive way, we can begin to have more respect for them as a human being that is a fellow struggler on planet Earth. And then also we want to deal with the real issue. And look at the problem, not the personality. And sometimes it's just the personality that we can become so frustrated with. And so here is a poem that was written by Don Kuhl, the founder of the Change Company. And when I worked with the prisoners, I always like to talk about in the anger resolution, looking at his poem that he wrote on. So it's the showdown. Rigorous honesty, dressed in white, sun at his back, rode into town. My gang took cover in the wasted crannies of my mind. False pride strutted on the rooftop. Fear hid under a wagon. Procrastination lingered over by the saloon. Deception looked around, unarmed, but wasn't. Suddenly, guns erupted, sparks ignited, smoke prevailed, then calm. The air smelled clean, and rigorous honesty stood alone. We can overcome all of those things when we get rigorously honest with ourselves. And so here's one more little thought from A Course in Miracles. Beauty will rise, because remember, we can't see what we see. Our brain has to reconfigure it to see what we're seeing. The beauty will arise to bless your sight as you look upon the world with forgiving eyes, and begin to realize that we are all flawed and fabulous, and to go for the resolving, the settling of the anger that we feel beginning to heat up. And it's not to say that there's that we can have a very effective way in handling life the more we look at the possibilities. In the meantime, have a great week and good mental health.
Good talk.